So now we're going to look at some examples. And the first example is home baking, something that's familiar, I'm sure, to many, if not all of us, baking a cake in a home setting. In this case, Mum and her daughter are baking a cake at home. In this particular part of the video, Mum is grating carrots. It's a carrot cake. And her daughter is measuring ingredients and putting them into the mixing bowl. There's a lot of activity going on because both of them are doing different things, and we actually have two cameras watching the scene. The activities may seem very familiar and even mundane to you. Well, I know they're baking a cake, but look at them through insightful eyes. Think about what we've been talking about and look at this very familiar video through insightful eyes. And maybe you're wondering in the back of your mind, I know I am, are these the best ways we've come up with to grate and store and measure and transfer and keep fresh? So watch it through insightful eyes. Watch the video, note down everything you can as best you can, remembering the 4 Ps. If you see something you think is a discontinuity, you didn't expect something to happen, or it seems to be a workaround, put a star down, maybe try and scribble yourself a quick note. Remember the 4 Ps, process, products, people and place. And if you get a chance, try and write down some timestamps. Remember we talked about how long it takes to do things, and there's actually a clock running on this video, or of course you can use your watch or your phone.
How much are you doing for that one, ma'am? Teaspoons of baking soda?
Yeah.
Okay, that looks good. Right.
This is done.
Good thinking, ma'am.
I need one.
Oh, that's probably pretty good, ma'am. Alright, have a little bit less than 2 cups.
2 cups?
Yeah.
Oh, then you should do one more.
So hopefully you watched that video and it looked familiar to you. And let's talk a little bit about it. First of all, how good are your notes, really? How many notes did you make? Have you got, like 3 or 30? I'd be looking for 30 out of a video like that. They should be quite granular. You should be making notes every few seconds, really. I find it's easy to kind of tune out when watching a video like that, and even in the field when I'm watching something, and just sort of let it wash over me and just watch like I'm watching TV and go, oh, this is interesting, I'm watching, yeah, but I'm not making any notes, and I kind of have to pinch myself to keep making notes. And it's a discipline that's worth learning is, what did I just see? What did I just see? Who did it? Where were they? What did they do it with? Think about the 4 Ps. Did you manage to capture timestamps? It's pretty hard to do that as you go along. You'll get better at it. And did you cover the 4 Ps? Maybe if you watched the video as a team, did you have different people looking at different things, or did you all just watch the process? Tempting to watch the process and not notice what's going on in the background or in the setting or what products are being used. Remember, it's your first attempt probably, the 4 Ps. Process, products, people and place. And often an example I might see in somebody's notes is, well, 2 minutes and 30 seconds, Mum grated carrots. Well, yes, that's absolutely true. But there's a lot more to it than Mum grating carrots. What did we really see happen when Mum started grating carrots? Well, we're all probably very familiar with baking, but if we look at it through insightful and now rigorous eyes, we should start to see much more and probably begin to notice things that we haven't even really considered before in such a simple thing as grating carrots. It's easy to just gloss over things and accept the status quo and accept, well, that's all she did. But let's look at it through those, well, is there anything odd there? Are there any discontinuities? Where odd might be things that took extra steps, maybe things that take longer than I imagine they should. Seems to introduce a risk of some kind, and that might be a risk to safety, a risk to a good outcome, or a risk to the whole thing being delayed by something. It maybe takes more or special tools or equipment, have to go and get different stuff. Or perhaps it seems to require a lot of skill or judgment and not something that you would want to tackle, without having been trained or at least experienced in doing it. Or things that need 3 hands, and you'll be surprised how many of those there are in the world. And of course, there's just this general capture, which makes me think, well, is there not just a better way to do that? We put men on the moon. Isn't there a better way to do that? So those are the kind of foci or the kind of eyes I look through when I'm looking for things that strike me as unusual or strange. So, thinking about that video through those insightful eyes, our mum balances a square slippery thing in a round slippery thing on a flat slippery thing. Does that sound like a good idea to you? The bowl that she actually ends up grating the carrots into and balancing on the slippery granite worktop has a much, much smaller contact area of the worktop than the grater itself would have. So she's actually made the situation worse for herself by using a small bowl. But the bowl is there because she needs to capture the carrot. So there needs to be some way to do that. But that doesn't look like a great way to do that to me. Graters are sharp, and yet inevitably she has to use her fingers. And they get closer and closer and closer to the blades as she grates away. And that means that she has to waste some carrot that she can't grate safely because she's getting too close to the blades and doesn't want to risk cutting her fingers. She grates 2 carrots at once at one time as well to try and save time. So that's a bit of a workaround. How can I speed this up? How can I make this easier on myself? I know I'll try and grate 2 carrots. But if you watch, the grip and the grating process gets a little bit harder when she tries to do that. She also then, at the end of the process, transfers all of the carrot in the round slippery bowl into a measuring jug to measure it, which seems mundane, but it creates more washing up, it creates the need to clean up, takes up a bit more space and an extra step. So those are the things that are striking me when I just watch a minute or 2 of somebody grating carrots. What about her daughter? It's quite interesting actually. Her daughter uses the lip of the baking soda box to scrape her measuring spoon level because she wants to get accurate measurements, and we know that when we're doing baking, it's kind of chemistry and you have to use the correct amounts. So she's scraping the spoon level so that she knows she's got exactly a half teaspoon or a teaspoon. So that's something of a workaround. Interestingly as well, notice that she puts the baking soda box back inside a Ziploc plastic bag, because once you open a box of baking soda, you can't keep it fresh without using a secondary container. So if I was a manufacturer of baking soda, I might look at that 2 ways. Well, that's good, my baking soda keeps going bad on people. Or, well, I'm not really making people happy with my product because they have to do an extra step to keep it fresh and look after it. The same trick of scraping, when her daughter tries to use the round spice jar, it's cinnamon or something, she can't do the scraping trick that she did on the baking soda box. And you see her look around and try and figure out what to do. And she grabs a knife and uses the back of a knife to scrape the excess cinnamon back into the jar. But that's a whole different ballgame that time, because she uses that second implement, she misses and actually loses a fair amount of spice onto the worktop. And at the end, when she puts the spice away, you see that there's quite a lot on the worktop. And that strikes me as, well, that's a shame. We ought to be able to solve that problem. So when you think about it, in a recipe, add 3 cups of grated carrot. Sounds so simple. And when it's written there, but actually to me, it prompts lots of questions, which is, why is grating such a tricky and dangerous process? Why did Mum do the grating? Well, I think we know the answer to that. It's a dangerous and tricky process, but does it have to be? How do you estimate the right number of carrots before you grate them rather than after? Wouldn't that be great? And then, could we make this whole process easier? Could we make it quicker? Could we make it safer? Could we make it fewer steps? Could we reduce the potential for risk and the potential for things going wrong, and the potential for having too much, too little? And you kind of begin to get the idea. I also sometimes at the end of observations, I ask myself, if I tried to explain this process to somebody from the future, somebody from another planet who'd never seen carrot grating, do you think they might look at me strangely, like I was a little bit crazy? If I said, well, you take a metal thing that's kind of square and not very stable, and you balance it in a shiny round thing with a really small base on a really slippery surface, and then you push on it, and then you rub your fingers up and down next to these really sharp blades, I think they might think I was a bit crazy. So it's clear to me that our mum needs a better way to grate carrots. And by looking through insightful eyes, we can begin to determine not only she has that need, but what needs to be improved within that process and within those products to make that whole thing better. In fact, we are finding unmet needs and underserved needs, needs that aren't fully met. And hey, all of those were unarticulated. Mum didn't tell us what the problems were, she didn't talk to us about grating, she just got on with it. But now when we look at it through the eyes of an observational researcher and perhaps through an innovator, we should be thinking, I can make life better. What about her daughter? What needs does she have? I haven't answered those here, but maybe you can think on that after the video.